OPM Task Force meeting on October 17, 2012 at 9:34. Probably somebody stuck in traffic.
Well, they had to come from out of town.
Maybe fell off. I don't know. I figured the computer was used. See, there should be no seats for everybody. There should be. We need one more member. I'm sorry, Jimmy. You know there's like 30 of those things? Or not those things. Did you want to bring up the what's everybody's name? I have that one page down there, there's like 40 of them. Oh yeah, no, that was my. I didn't know what to cancel on that printer.
Have a seat on the shot.
I printed the agenda, and then I went to print this, and I hit print, and it's. Yeah, I'm telling you, that was everybody got here today because it's even though right now. That's what called it. You saw that. What it says, so she's coming down there sort of says get start. Well, they made a pre-determination that there are she can get agreements to another contract. He was going up, so my cynical response to it. All I do, so yeah, you guys have introduced the term organism. Good morning, Sean. From our federal the state legislature government support the organism management. I was I just got that. I can sit over there, that's fine. Next time I'm heels, I'm confused. But you replaced insect control with organism management. So you're going to do it there? That's the only place I saw it. So I was looking at this line, that's the first time I've ever seen you yours. Yeah, sorry, we're waiting for a member. She's got the original. Yeah. We're going to bring 5. Alright, I see well, what they're doing is that organism management. They usually put the phone first. Anyway, the next
next generation of well, if I get some direction back, I'll actually Charlie because there might be some there might be something on that maybe especially
We're getting a little bit of
I'm sure that
Yeah.
take it.
See, I give him a lot of let's do it, let's get started. All right, apologize for the delay, but we've got another member coming as well. They'll be here shortly. I'm going to remind everybody, again, bathrooms just down the hallway. If we had a fire drill, make sure you don't run off because we got you signed in, and we need to make sure we don't lose you and have to send the fire marshal or the fire department back in here to look for you. With that, I'm going to go through roll call and we'll begin the meeting. John Bolts. Present. Lynn Adams. Here. Ken Fredericks. Here. Kirk Smith. Here. Jimmy Fox. He's on his way. Bill Hemminghouse. Got a hold of him and he indicated he will not be here and will so let me know in advance that he would not make the meeting. But we do have a quorum. That's what we have present. And I believe in just a few minutes, Jimmy Fox will be here. So with that, we'll just continue on with the agenda. Again, the listserv, there's Jimmy right there. Come on in. There's a spot right over there. So again, everybody's been getting everything that we've been sending out. I guess the things I wanted to point out, I just had a couple things on there just so everybody's aware. One of the real concerns initially was the fact that people were very concerned about the office management budget and that it was going to be some kind of impact on the Department of Agriculture. Unfortunately, it's in very good shape, and actually there's more funding in there than we plan on spending, and so we, as part of this package, we're changing funding sources, so that will help to bring that fund balance down in the long run. And I don't remember what I have for changes, updates, and other items out of the ordinary. So I'm just going to continue on with the agenda. Everybody got the draft of the rules and the statutes was sent out on August 15th. We had an initial document that we sent out that provided a few more changes, and then we had one more meeting. I actually left everything sit there for 2 weeks and went back and read it again, and I came up with several other questions, and based on that, October 5th, or Monday, we sent out a new changes document, which included all those that were on the first one, but it had additional changes and clarifications that we had. That was a 6-page document, and I guess the main things, there was an issue raised concerning the fact that we talked about a wood-destroying organism guarantee, and that was not what had come out. It was supposed to be a termite guarantee, and so we changed that. We also put in some specifics regarding if someone is convicted of certain things, a felony or a misdemeanor involving moral turpitude, we can deny that license. And this is, maybe I watch TV too much. It's the kind of thing where you see these people who are licensed by a governmental agency, and they are still licensed. They are licensed by us, so that gives them access to your home, and they've just been convicted of something bad, and there's no way we can deal with it. And this was to give us the ability, when somebody gets convicted of something like that, we can do something about it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that. Is there anything? I mean, you guys all saw the changes that went out. Does anybody have anything that they wanted to bring up, or anybody in the audience? Is there anything that jumped out at you? problematic or you want to discuss at this point in time? Anyone? Feel free.
Discussing what are we doing?
Actually, what I'm talking about is just the six-page change document which affected both the statute and rules. So if there's anything that came out in this document that folks wanted to talk about, go ahead, Casey.
The August 15th document or changes that are included in that have not been discussed by the task force.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, none of the changes have been discussed, but I guess I'm not sure if we need to discuss them. Everybody's had them. They have had the opportunity to look at them to see how they changed the August 15th stuff that was sent out. We can certainly go through these things if we want to, but I looked at most of them as there weren't really substantive changes that we had other than the criminal, and again, there was the area where we had reduced a couple of requirements again with the WDIIR, keeping them in numerical order or numbering them numerically. We added something that was practical, which is in the Department of Agriculture, when we have continuing education courses, they notify us when they're going to have them. And it's much easier for the user community than to find them right now. What happens is the people who are approved for continuing education credits, you have to contact those individuals to say, hey, when are you going to put on a course? Are you going to be putting on a course? And if it's known and it doesn't affect internal or online, you're supposed to let us know so it can be posted on the web so people have access to that.
I had one comment, Jack, on this August 15th changes. This has come up before, but I know we spent quite a bit of time.
Give a reference to what.
Oh, I'm sorry. First page, under definitions, number 16, immediate supervision.
Yes.
Means the use of a pesticide by, et cetera, et cetera. We spent a fair amount of time and had a subcommittee discussing devices, what's to be recognized as registered device or device that we need to regulate, something to that effect. So when I read this definition, to me that seems to just limit the immediate supervision as the use of the pesticide only, not necessarily a registered device. So you're not worried about being immediately supervised for using a recognized device?
And no, the immediate supervision had to do with the relative toxicity of the products. That's the only place that the immediate supervision came into play. So that's why we keep that that way. Go ahead.
Since we're talking about devices,
Okay.
I have a couple comments, if I could. Joe Sigler, here's an affirmative. And I'm not trying to substitute, my views for the wisdom of the task force or the knowledge of the industry, because I just, don't have either. But as I read and reread the issue of devices, it struck me, number one, the definition was way too broad. Number two, and again with respect, it appears to me the task force is saying this is an area we need to regulate. There's and the reasons why have been put forth. We need to regulate it, but if you're not a licensed applicator, we're not going to regulate you. But then at the same time, you're going to have to have advertising saying you're not a licensed operator. If you need to regulate something, you regulate it. You don't set up regulation and then set up a bifurcated process where you can slip out of regulation very easily. And I can slip out of that one very easily. My concern is that the department and OPM, the way it's currently structured, could be spending an awful lot of time chasing an awful lot of people, a lot of energy. And I don't want to be disrespectful and use the word inconsistent, but you either regulate or you don't. And if you have to regulate for a good reason, and you do it in such a way that is enforceable, and I am concerned that we're setting up a system that really isn't enforceable and a lot of energy. My suggestion, my unleavened suggestion, is for the task force, for the time being, to bypass the issue of devices. Let's just set it aside. Sidestep it. This is an ongoing process. We've already said, and we're saying in the report that we've got some reforms, we've got some changes. We don't know what all the consequences of those things are. We're going to live some of that, and this is going to be a work in progress. This will be a dialogue, as it should be. Anytime you're talking about regulation, do you regulate, do you not? How do you know? And so my suggestion is that the issue of devices should be sidestepped for the time being until it can be thought out in a different format.
Vince, was that yours?
Yes.
You had devices, right?
Yes.
I'm just trying to, our discussion was, some of this was, we listed specifically in here the things we aren't going to regulate.
Under
Or 304. 304.
Should read the definition of devices.
Sure. Definitions. It's in the statute. Page 3.
Yeah, device means instrument or contrivance that is intended to be used for trapping, destroying, repelling, or mitigating any pest or any other form of plant or animal life. And then in our rules, devices exempt from licensure, Article 2904, exempt from licensure and registration, says the following devices are not subject to the licensure and registration requirements of this chapter or the OPM statutes. Physical barriers used to remove or prevent infestation by pests, equipment used for the physical removal of pests or the habitat of the pest, mechanical equipment used for the physical removal of weeds or other vegetation, mechanical traps used without pesticide, installation equipment used for home improvement or modifications, raptors used to control or relocate other birds, and firearms. An unlicensed person who engages in the business of pest management but is exempt from licensure and registration because the person does not apply any pesticides and only uses the device listed in subsection A, which I just read, shall prominently display or repeat the phrase, not a licensed pest control company, in all written and oral advertisements.
Yeah, my biggest concern is with that, and it was when we did the committee and everything else, is, you have the definition. How is somebody going to be exempt from this if they're actually out there doing an inspection and identifying pests, and they're going to come up with a control measure to control those pests? By your definition, you have to have a license to be able to do that inspection and to identify those pests. So that's my biggest concern, is that there's going to be confusion there, and I hate to see the department get themselves in control over that. That's just my biggest concern.
And to add to what Mr. Sig and Mr. Frederick had mentioned, the reason why we have even proposed this is because without this, we're going after everybody. Because the definition of pest control means go after anybody, no matter what they use, if they're controlling pests, and we didn't want to do that. When it comes to identification, our inspectors see identification different than others. If we see birds, and a person says there's a bird and I'm going to put up a spike, we don't view that as identification. What type of bird is it? What species is it? Okay, now you're identifying. But in our world, if a person says ant, or they say insect, what is it? When it gets to the point that you use a term other than a general term that a 5-year-old could use, then we see that then as as identification. So that's how we're currently looking at things, so that we don't have to go after everybody. If it's right or wrong, it's not really for us to decide, but what we were actually looking at is how could we create language that would prevent this agency from going after everybody, including people who are using devices that cause no harm to the public or the environment.
So if we didn't have it in here, what we'd have to do is we'd have to adopt a substantive policy, which then you have to go through eventually and adopt a rule. Right? You know?
Vince, John Bolts. Vince, the language and how you guys put that together, what was the reference point for that language? Was it come up with from scratch? And I don't remember that part of the discussion when we dealt into the devices, but did you guys canvas stuff from other states, or what was the, how did you guys come up with the language in particular? Because Joe and I started to have this conversation, but I'm missing that.
We started, but you cut me off.
I'm good with that.
Mr. Waltz, folks, we actually contacted other states. Colorado has something similar. Texas has something similar. Indiana has something very similar. So we actually looked at other states and the dilemma that they had with enforcing everything and said, okay, how can we not enforce everything?
And their regulators that you spoke to, which is who I'm sure you got the information from, that had worked well in their state. They didn't have a lot of pushback or a lot of controversy over the issue.
No, what they didn't. The thing that I find interesting, in my view, doesn't reflect the view of this agency or Mr. Butler or even Mr. Peterson, but I have to like Indiana. They don't regulate devices at all. They allow people to use any device to treat anything and everything, even though it may actually result in consumer fraud. Because their attitude is, we regulate pesticides because pesticides can harm the public or the environment, but we're not concerned about anything else.
So libertarian on the devices and sticking to pesticides.
Correct, but I'm not a liberal.
No.
Henry?
Henry Schneiker, International Accommodations. I have to completely agree with Vince on this, that the pest control agency has no business in regulating devices. They should stick to pesticides. And going back to your definition of identifying creatures, there are a whole lot of professions that have nothing to do with pest control, such as the Audubon Society or various other people who on a regular basis identify creatures, and they certainly aren't doing pest control. So the mere act of identifying creatures should have nothing to do with pest control. Pest control should be strictly limited to the use of pesticides and forget everything else, in my opinion.
Thank you. All right. So, we certainly don't want to be going after everybody who's doing anything. I guess that's the thing. Comes up with the business of, or what is it? The business of structural pest management, or whatever it is.
Mismanagement services.
Mismanagement services. That's what definition.
We did put in, they're not, use of the device is not exempt.
So, Jack explained one thing, but I know we've changed a little bit the way we're no longer going to be deciding on an appropriate name for a pest control company, sort of thing. So, let's say when I retire, I wanted to start Smitty's Bird Control. And all I'm going to use is devices. Because my company's name is Bird Control, is that going to be allowed or not allowed? Is that going to be considered to be advertising of using control tactics for using devices on them? And that's just part of the quagmire that's kind of being generated here. So,
At least based on the way, I believe it's read, you would have to indicate that you're now licensed pest control officer.
So you could use the name and have something underneath that said non-licensed pest control.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's also interesting to note that when we contacted Dakota, was it South or North? When we contacted North Dakota, they actually have something similar where they have licensed companies and unlicensed companies, and so they want the unlicensed companies to advertise that they're not licensed so that it educates the consumer, doesn't give the consumer the impression, okay, you're going to use these type of pesticides in order to protect my home. So that's where the concept of actually subsection B actually indicates that if they were unlicensed, that they would have to advertise as such.
Mr. Chairman, again, how do you afford to regulate unlicensed people? I'm not licensed, so.
By definition, you don't. You can't.
You do because you're requiring them to put a caveat on their advertising. So you are regulating.
They're regulated to the extent that they violate that caveat.
With respect, but I think with respect, I think that makes my point. We feel we need to regulate, but if I'm not in the pesticide business, I'm not going to be regulated. But yet, I'm still going to have to put this caveat, and it's just it's a rabbit chase for the department. That's why my suggestion was to put a time date to sidestep.
Casey, did you want to?
Sure. Members of the task force, I guess one thing I want to say is I'm comfortable with the language. This went through subcommittee. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of, I feel like it addresses the concerns that have been brought up, understood properly. I also, not just for this issue, but for all issues, people are using pesticides and devices without a license. There are provisions in the statutes and rules for putting fines on people or taking injunctive relief against people going to a court, for example, to stop, whatever. So there are provisions for handling people just because they're not required to have a license. Doesn't mean that the department or the Office of Pest Management doesn't have authority to take action.
Go ahead.
Harvey Logan, Western Exterminator. I was on that device committee, and I raised that concern that I'll raise now. I believe that the sole, or not the sole, but certainly one of the important roles of OPM is the protection of the public. And when you start straying away from those devices that can be considered fraud, or they're going to rip the public off without any regulation or control, I think you do a disservice to the public.
Courtney Levinus with ABPPO. We're actually in agreement with Joe's recommendation. Within our membership, this is an area that is still being debated, and we haven't come to really any kind of consensus. So I think it would be a good idea if the task force would allow to either continue another subcommittee on it or make it a work in progress as we move through this process. I know we're trying to tie this up and finalize the package to go to the governor and leadership. But as with any piece of legislation, as it moves along, if we can continue to work on it and reach some sort of consensus on it in the future, I think would be beneficial to all involved.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Jimmy Fox, Evergreen Turf. This is a work in progress, and I think we'd all be kidding ourselves if we thought when this goes through, this is the final and this is the end. I don't really think that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think there's a lot of things that once this is moved, hopefully under the Department of Ag, there are a lot of things that could be changed. There are other areas that are currently regulated but not regulated, such as small landscape contractors. They're not aren't required to have a license if they use less than certain amounts of chemical. We don't go out and regulate them daily, but in essence, if they violate it, they come under regulation, as much as the use of devices. And so, we can't capture everything, especially at this stage, I think, of trying to write this document. So I think there are some things we just need to realize that it is a work in progress, and we need to move on. And if this is satisfactory to this point, knowing there will be further discussion, I think we should move on.
I think what I'm hearing, I've heard two people who are involved in the legislative process that have indicated that this is probably going to be problematic legislatively. And I understand that, and I think we need to take that, we need to listen to that. But I also, from the other side of the aisle, which is where we are, and right now, based on the way this is defined, we have to regulate everybody. We've not exempted anybody out using any of these things. And I think that, to me, it's more problematic to me. Not that matters, but we're gonna have to deal with that on a day in and day out basis, and that's one of the concerns that I think the agriculture industry has been concerned about, is the fact that we're going to get involved in something that's totally ridiculous. I hope my common sense lies a little off at some point in time and say, no, we shouldn't do this. But this device was to give us some leeway and not having to deal with those things. So, but if we have, probably, again, I look at these two folks who are involved in the legislative process, who will be over there on a daily basis. We got other legislative folks here as well. If that's the advice they're giving us, I have a hard time not accepting that, because I don't want this bill to die based on a device that people are going over there and screaming and hollering about that we're full of beans. So, go ahead, Vince.
Yeah, and I don't want any of you folks to think that we rushed into this. This was very difficult subcommittee meeting, and from the compliance standpoint, it was difficult for me because currently these things that are listed here on the 304, we get complaints on them. And when we get complaints on them, there's not a thing that we can do about it. The last complaint that I had was a woman filed a complaint against a company because they used kite string, that they put it up on her home to catch pigeons, and one of the pigeons' feet got tied up in the kite string and was hanging upside down. She wanted us to do something about it. And I didn't know what to do about it because we don't have anything in our rules or statutes that address that. So I saw that, okay, it's bird control work, and you need a license for that. Okay, but then what in our training material is going to educate this person? Nothing, because our training material deals with pesticides in the environment. And, so it's very difficult, but then I certainly understand the standpoint from the licensed pest control industry, because they're actually doing things right, perhaps with devices, perhaps with pesticides. And I think that if we do go back to the drawing board on that, we really have to change the definition of structural pest management. I do not believe that we're going to get anywhere on devices unless we change that definition.
Vince, I did get those, you and Jack, I did reviews on this, so I did make them work out.
Oh, thanks.
Actually, I don't think we do. Oh, not now.
Kirk, just a quick comment on devices. I like what Indiana has done. The reason is because we don't want to become in a situation where we have to be jury and judge on whether the device is appropriate or not. We have a lot of folks here that do bird control in the room. I can take a lot of bird sites where the spikes are a complete failure. And yet some people say they work and some people say they don't. And are you going to be the person to make that judgment? Where do you draw the line? So I agree where we are now with this. This is a state first.
To dovetail on Kurt's comment, the other thing is 20 years ago, common sense prevailing with dealing with animals and abatement or whatever. A gal with a device that has a pigeon hanging upside down, if she put that device there or asked somebody to, in this day and age of animal cruelty being taken to the extreme another way, we could, the Department of Ed could approve some of that sort of stuff as well, and that would be horribly unpleasant. It's like, well, we're licensing people to do this, or these are unlicensed, but it's condoned under this section, and yet, then we got other issues. So as it relates to, I can't wait until people start worrying about the worms that are crawling on the lettuce and how I'm killing them, but and having feelings and all that stuff. But at least the present animals, four-legged and two-legged, seem and winged have people are anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Laurie Bard with Nose. I was on the subcommittee for the device discussion, and we were charged with two really different things. One, we had to deal with these devices that are out there that a handyman is using, and all of us agreed that that wasn't appropriate to try to control if a handyman is putting screens up on vents to keep roof rats out. The second is that there are certain contrivances being used in the field that are identifying pests. Now, I strongly disagree with what was said before, that I think the critical part of pest control is the identification, because if you don't properly identify the pest, how are you going to know how to treat it? And so we were trying to come up with a definition that included some of these contrivances in the field that are used to identify pests and define them as devices. Specifically, we were talking about dogs. And the second was to eliminate having to regulate a handyman in Fountain Hills putting screens on air vents. And those were the two tasks we were defined with, and I thought we did a pretty good job of coming up with what we did.
Just one last thing. I do want to stress that we are all concerned about the use of bed bug machines and the individuals who may go to homes and say that a person has bed bugs when they may or may not. We all felt that those individuals should definitely be regulated.
So what is the pleasure of the task force?
I like what we have.
That was kind of your opinion. So move on. That's good. Okay. Would be okay with that? I mean, granted, it's going to go through a legislative process where, it could be taken out in a heartbeat anyway. So.
And what we changed it to could be taken out in a heartbeat.
Correct. Any opposing? No, let's move on. Okay, thank you. That was good discussion, I think. Anything else in the in this whole package that we wanted to?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
In the rules package, the last section starting on page 52.
Give a section, please.
Sorry. R3-3101, page 52.
3-3-101, so that's the agriculture stuff.
Yeah, this has to do with the golf course changes.
Okay.
Yeah. The only two questions, if I may, and maybe you can clarify this, but on page 54 under the renewal, there's a lot of discussion here about CEUs. Are we still going to have certified applicators licensed by OPM for golf, or are we going for...
If they do it for hire.
So the CEUs that are defined, is that going to be CEUs authorized for OPM licensure or for ag licensure?
What we're talking about here is agriculture. These are those folks that are they're acting as a private applicator on their golf course. They will have to get agriculture CEUs. And in the long run, I mean, as we look at this, let's hope that we can start to bring these CEUs together where we possibly can.
So for a golf course, we're going to have a roller permit for the course. You're going to have a certified applicator or a custom applicator. And anybody else doing pest control for hire, I'm assuming, Jimmy, this could be field hands going out there doing basic weed control, are they going to continue to be licensed under OPM, or are they going to have to go into this new licensing system?
If they're doing it for hire on a golf course, they will be licensed under OPM.
Okay.
If they work for the golf course,
Yeah, they're working on their golf course where they're employed.
So they're a full-time employee, and
They're, yes, they're private applicator,
Or
right?
part-time employee. And then their CEUs would be the Department of Ag
Yes.
program, not the OPM program. Okay, I was a little confused.
Wherever you have your credential, you will take your CUs from that organization.
The other comment I have is, and, you know, we've talked about this before, but this has to do with the whole examination process. In your directive statutes, however this department operates, how is it dictated how examinations are approved, authorized, rewritten, reviewed, et cetera? Do you have anything, anywhere in writing that says that has to be done?
No.
Because my only concern is when we've talked to acknowledge them here, that the exams for the OPM licensing really need to be rewritten. They need to reflect more accurately on somebody's ability to be a QP for termites or whatever. And I agree with that. Are we going to leave it up to the director to make that decision, or do we need to stipulate that in the rule somewhere? A certain process needs to be followed, or you're going to create a committee. That committee's going to have X number of outside members, that the exams need to be renewed on a bi-yearly process or something of that nature. And the only reason I say that is because under the golf course portion of it here, you have more substantial definitions of what need to be in the exam versus how it's identified in the OPM rule itself. So you got a little bit of inconsistency.
I'll just give you my opinion as the current acting director. Do we want to put it in a rule? No. Then why would we put something like that in a rule? In agriculture, we don't have anything in rule. When ideally, and I think I said this at a previous meeting, ideally it'd be great to update those exams every year. But it's not going to happen.
Right.
We need to go through a process. We talked about that. We have to go through a process. We need to update these exams to show that people are competent in what they're doing. But by putting in a rule saying we're going to do this every year or every 2 years, I just think that puts an additional fork in us. As an industry, they need to make sure they say, these exams are really getting bad. We need to do something. So let's appoint a task force and let's do it. So that's my opinion.
Working for Maricopa County, we operate under a lot of policies and directives. And every time a new policy is created, there's always an expiration date on the policy, so that at the end of that period, that policy has to be reviewed or re-examined by committee, rewritten, whatever. I would just like to see something somewhere stating that these exams should be looked at every 4 or 5 years, whatever, or if there's a significant change in FIFMA or something of that nature. That's just my personal opinion, but because again, I don't know how we're going to handle it now, because if we're redoing this whole thing, OPM is going to be a new division in this department. We might as well just start with everything. I would like, and maybe we should just start creating a new committee already. Let's get an examination committee and start that process for the exams. And if you want to keep it outside the rules, I'm okay with that, but I didn't know. But as far as what you have here, I think we need to be a little bit more consistent with what you have here on page 53. You have a little bit more definitions of what you want to see in the exam versus what you have on page, where are we? Versus what you have on page 24 for the OPM exam.
Kurt, as far as I know, in the pesticide rule, there's just areas that are supposed to be covered, but there's no specificity as what's to be tested. Right. I would agree.
Okay.
Jeff, in my experience on the ag side, I've only been through it one time because of my age, but It seemed like the industry brought it up, the Department of Ag agrees, it was handled in a timely manner and in an appropriate manner. And without having, if it had been in rules, maybe we would be doing work we didn't need to, or not doing work often enough that we need to do. But with waiting for both either the industry or the department to say, hey, we need to address this, and leaving it at the discretion of yourself and the director of the Department of Ag seems to make enough sense to me that I don't think anybody's going to take their eye off the ball as to whether the testing is appropriate.
It was a multi-year project.
Yeah, that thing was twice the project time-wise.
Okay, anything else? Okay, good.
Sorry, one more question. Page 53, again, this is the golf course.
Can you give me a reference?
3208, applicator certification exam, etc. Under section C, this is the fumigation certification. Number 3, we're talking about fumigation certification is only for burrowing road problems in golf courses. What if a golf course has a significant nematode problem, fumigation is the source of solving that problem? Would that be a different licensing system? How would you handle that?
As a private applicator in Arizona, which these guys will be certified as private applicators, they can apply any product. So you're talking about a soil fumigant.
Correct.
And soil fumigant labels have just recently gone through an EPA change, which requires training programs by the registrants, and so they will have to follow that process. If you're doing nematodes, would you use aluminum phosphide or you use toes? Yeah. And Dow has a training program still on that. Okay. Anything else? I'm good. Okay. Go ahead.
Soil fumigation, is that a grandfather in there for those of us who are doing soil fumigation now?
You're certified in the fumigation category?
Yes.
There are label-specific requirements that say you have to have training by, what's that? Oh, please introduce yourself.
Oh, Phyllis, it's our turn.
Your last name is It's Our Turn?
Faranga.
Okay, thank you.
Don't be stupid.
I'm not being stupid. I'm trying to make it part of the record. That's what we've asked people to do.
Answer the question.
Thank you for your kind words. The answer is there's label-required training requirements. So no matter what, you will have to go through what is required on the label. Okay? That answer your question?
Not really.
Not really? As a grandfather, you will be able to continue to use fumigants as you have in the past. But if the label requires that you take registrant-provided training, you are going to have to take registrant-provided training. And that's what the labels are going to be saying. Okay?
That answers the question.
Thank you.
Can I answer, Phyllis, can I ask you a question? What fumigant you're using?
I'd rather not say.
Okay. If not,
One other comment.
okay.
This bio that was put together by all the task force
Yes,
members,
yes.
are you going to include your bio in this?
Yes, I am.
With gravitas.
Yeah. Did you look up the meaning of that?
Keep it to one
I know at least one trade.
Yeah, I was not planning on that. I had put it as industry appointed members, but it was suggested that
I think mine is appropriate.
Okay. Having gone through that, let's go to the cover letter and the report. And I sent it out to everybody. Go ahead.
Before we jump to that, I just wanted to mention one other change that we discovered this morning.
Oh.
For the rules, it's for Rule 503, it's on record retention. So section B6 still refer to certain circumstances of a 5-year retention period. I'm going to reduce that down to 4.
As we have forever.
Do you have it?
Oh, yeah.
That brings up a question regarding record retention. On the landscape exemption, their record retention, if I remember right, is only 60 days. I was kind of curious where that came from. Sorry if I can't remember where that came from.
Yeah.
The weed control. I believe they only had to keep documentation for 60 days, where they were requiring everybody else a minimum for 3 years. So,
Is that based on the current exemption?
No, the
is
current
that
exemption
statute or
doesn't-
rule? I can't
the
remember.
current exemption doesn't specify how we were looking at that from the standpoint of what type of herbicide are they applying? Are they applying something that would merit keeping a record for more than 60 days?
Right.
Since they would be prohibited from using the pre-emergent, and they're not using the restricted pesticide, we didn't see the practicality of them maintaining that record for more than a couple of months.
Okay. That was your, I was just curious, because that was the only inconsistency I saw in there. So I can't remember the page.
Okay. Okay. Let's go to the cover memo and any suggested changes.
I've got one, Jack, just it's under the task force discussion topics for termite action report one. Just to clarify on the back page, it says reports are also filed when an inspection of a property is performed, determine if a treatment for wood destroying insects is needed, and that's not accurate.
I'm sorry, what page?
I don't know. Under the TARP page. Under TARP. Okay. Task force discussion topic. First sentence TARP.
Okay.
And on the back page, when it talks about what the TARP is about, it says reports are filed when an inspection of the property is performed to determine if the treatment for wood destroying insects is needed, and that's not accurate. It's done on a real estate transaction, whether it be a refinance or a purchase, but not if you're not trying to sell your home or property.
That's a treatment.
There's a treatment proposal, and we don't have to
You don't have a
start
car for that. Okay. 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 So we'll correct that. Okay. Anything else?
That was the only thing I saw. Oh, and questions? Yeah, sorry. Again, under the TARP, it says here, task force recommendation on the TARPs?
Yes.
Required for filing for pre-case and post-construction only, no more inspection for the WDIRs? Is that accurate? I think it's a good idea.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we just added that.
What?
WDI.
Yeah, no, we added.
So there's no fee.
Oh, okay.
Yes. We put it in there so it was clear that there was no fee. Yes.
I'm just curious how the real estate industry might feel about that.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Just for clarity, if it's the same, there's no fee for WDIR, we still have to report it.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes.
Which
Sorry.
the language makes it sound like you don't have to report it.
Oh, okay.
Well, it says required filing for pre-trees and post-construction treatments only, no more inspections.
Should be no fee. There should be no fee. Okay, thank you. Okay. Anything else? Thank you, those are good tips.
There are some formatting things on this report. Some things should be centered, some things should be gapped, and that. So there are some formatting things that have to be done. And then the second thing.
Are you volunteering?
Sure. Well, as long as you're agreeable on that. You and I have been negotiating some comments about, particularly in the section, why should OPM be under ADA? And we've been, I even was sending you some things yesterday,
And actually, that's that sheet that's on top. I gave, these are to add a couple sentences to the report. Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
oh.
Yes. Just want to thank for giving, I read this. Going match what Mr. President mentioned about the inspection report? Is it the position of the agency that we don't want to be associated with all WDIR because it's something new?
I had it in my mind that we weren't going to have any. And that what we wrote in the rule too, or maybe we didn't. That was the most recent change. Let me. Electronic submission of WDIR, 0. Under 103, R4-29-103. That was a recent change. Oh, electronic supplemental WDIR submission. Okay. Okay.
And folks, the reason why this is really big for you folks, because it has to be stressed. Even I don't know if Ken has even thought about this. Currently, no one in the industry is submitting supplemental WDIRs. No one. You do the initial inspection, and then if you find termites and retreat, then within 30 days, if you do that second inspection, you're currently not reporting that. However, there's nothing in rule or statute that says that you're not supposed to report it. So all we're currently doing now is clarifying, yes, it should be reported. However, there's no fee associated with reporting it. Because then it truly gives a homeowner or home buyer a complete impression, if you will, of the home. They see the original termite inspection that says you have termites, but then currently they don't see the second one. Well, does the home still have termites? I don't know because...
But it would show that it was corrected. Whatever company was hired to do the correction has to file a car plan that goes through.
Correct, but currently there's a provision that says that allows you to do that supplemental, but the industry has not been submitting these supplementals to us. And they haven't been doing that since 1988.
So this would be a new requirement?
Yes.
I wasn't looking at it. I didn't realize that.
I just wonder if it's really necessary. I'll be honest with you, because when I do a post-treatment on a home, I got to submit that CARF anyway. So if I'm buying a home and XYZ Pest Control did the inspection, I did the post-treatment, then the termites were taken care of. And then that buyer can call me and say it's still under warranty or whatever information is. I just don't want to see more burden put on a pest control company that have to submit a supplemental product. I just don't.
It's a good thing I mentioned it.
Yeah, it is. I'm glad we're having this discussion because I didn't understand that. So that's I'm with you.
I mean, you're already asking companies now to start doing use reporting if that goes through. So why ask them to do use reporting?
Okay.
Just my opinion.
So we'll have to make sure we have that clarified in here as to how that. We'll make sure that that's out of there, so you don't have to do that. Okay. Go ahead.
I am belaboring the point, but there was some language that I had submitted after this was put out. It's not in there yet, and I didn't know if you and I were still negotiating it or not.
I don't remember.
Well,
let's not left an impression on you.
Apparently not. So I'll draw it in bold next time.
Big crayon.
Big crayon. Yeah, I'm a big crayon. Tying the task force, you know. The agricultural community had a summit 2 years ago, and some of the things that came out of that summit resulted in this task force and really carrying forth some of the recommendations, i.e. the fact that OPM would continue to operate as a managed unit, and I haven't seen that yet, and I'd like to see it either.
That was in there, I thought.
I read it somewhere. Yeah, you read my email.
Well, this
doesn't read your email.
I get it. No.
Well,
is this where it talks about the summit of agriculture interests that predated the legislation?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing that is put. This is the top sheet that was not added that I'm asking folks to look at for potential adding to the.
Well, it's not my fault. Jack flooded me with so many different versions. I didn't know which one we were talking about. Thank you.
All right. So, anything else? We'll continue on. We'll talk about these at the potential additions later. Okay? Anything else? With the, that jumped out, folks? I mean, does it,
Did you need to say process or progress?
well, actually, will be progress. Work in progress. So that was on page 2 of the cover memo, it says process, it should be progress on the second to last paragraph. Work in progress, work in progress, process, even though work in process kind of works too. Okay? Since we're on that paragraph, the cover sheet that was on there, the thing that said just the short little thing that was on the top, at the end of that paragraph we're just looking at, the work in progress, that's where there's the first sentence up there, it says for consideration adding this model of operation was recommended by a sum of agriculture interests that predated the legislation establishing the task force. Any concerns with that? Okay. And then let's continue on, go to the end of the next paragraph. And then that's the second sentence, which is post-task force. Additional changes must continue to be deliberate. Again, regulation definition limits business, but regulation should not be used to limit business. I really like that one.
I was fond of it. Even though Ben didn't get it.
You said it too many yellows.
Yeah. So, if we're okay with those, I'll throw those in there as well. Okay. Anything else in the report? And we'll get the report put up online, as we always do. Anything else from the group? Okay. Let's move on to next steps. This has got to go to the legislature, as you know, and the deadline for getting a bill is, I just got an email on that from someone in the legislature. I can't remember where it is. And again, is Robert here?
Yeah.
Okay. Robert had asked that quite some time back about, was this going to be an industry bill or a agency bill? And at that point in time, I said, I certainly hope it's an industry bill. So I guess I wanted to talk about that in this setting. And then because we have industry representatives here to see whether they are willing to do that or not. So task force, first off, is that kind of your hope that this will be an industry bill or not?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Having said that, then we need industry, and I'm thinking as opposed probably the most logical person to.
Courtney
Yes,
Leminas
please.
with ABPPO. We've kind of talked amongst ourselves and between our industry and the ag community, and ABPPO will be heading up that effort.
Okay. Okay. And granted, I certainly am willing to help in any way I can, but I'm not big into the legislative process. And the reason I brought it up here too is I said that, I've got in task force availability during the session, because during the session as the bill does come up, I think it's important that we actually have you guys who have been on the task force and are also in the industry to come and, just voice, your support. And so does that seem workable to most folks? If you have enough advance warning, because I think if they publish them like a week in advance, the calendars, calls and contacts would go to folks saying, this would be heard by somebody to come in to talk if need be, so. Okay. Thank you, Courtney, I really appreciate that. And Joe, I know it's a work in progress, so. Anything else that we want to talk about with this part?
Just for clarification, when this is submitted, we're going to be submitting the statutes and rule changes as well.
Correct.
Correct. Will that package include all of the cross-outs, the eliminations, the additions,
Yes.
or is it a clean package?
It will include, it will look like that because that's the way the
That's what I was just
legislature
curious
works.
about.
It allows them to see what the changes are, see what is concerned. Okay. Go ahead.
So you will be trying to avoid the GRRC process? Governor's Regulatory Review?
Oh, with the initial adoption of the rules, yes. Oh, again, that was Phyllis Baranga. We've asked for an exemption to allow adoption of the rules because the statutes are generic now, and so much of the detail was in the statutes before. So we've asked that it go into the rules, and we asked that through an emergency exempt rulemaking we can do that. Again, as this process moves along, and Jimmy said it very well today, if we think that this is going to be the end of it, it's not. We will have to go back and make changes, so there will, then we will go through the current process. But initially, to go with the statute changes, we need to have a rule package to go along with it.
So depending on feedback from the legislature, this committee can still be asked to come together to...
No, well, this is, and feel free to disagree with Casey. We never talked about this, but my view of this is, as of today, if we agree that this should be submitted, the task force will be done with its required responsibilities. However, I do believe that the Pest Management Advisory Committee will probably be the mechanism to continue to try to get industry input on these. And as I have done, I've tried to do with as I talked to PMAC, I've tried to talk to the Ag Advisory Council in the same light, so everybody kind of is in the loop of it, because that's the only thing that's of concern to the industry as well. So PMAC, I think, will kind of take up the lead with it. Hearing none, I guess I'd like a motion to approve the letter package and report to be submitted with the caveat that there may be, we keep finding little changes here, as long as we're not making a substantive change to the document, that we can move forward with that. Go ahead, Casey.
I would add to the motion like that, including the changes that have been discussed today.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Boltz. I move that we move forward with the cover letter, the package of rules, and all with including the amendments of today and grammatical or otherwise changes that seem fit by yourself, and statutes, and be submitted.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Jimmy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. We will move forward with this then. Moving on to the agenda. We have nothing, there's an executive session again. So we'll just move on into the call to the public. And again, realize that the task force can't respond unless it's on the agenda, and we'll limit you to 2 minutes of time. So, go ahead.
Joe Sig again. I just want to thank the task force. This has been a huge time commitment, and I appreciate the time you spend here, time that you're not spending in your business, and I respect the time and contributions, even for those who don't read everything I set out. But I do sincerely respect your time. And worst thing we can do is waste people's time. And I respect that you all have been willing to make those contributions.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Courtney Levine, on behalf of AZPPO, I want to echo those comments, but also congratulate the task force. I know this wasn't always an easy process, and you had all kinds of issues and disagreements from back here, and I think we've come up with a great product. And again, appreciate your time and efforts in considering this is going to be a process, and look forward to moving forward.
No, go ahead.
Harvey Logan, Western, ditto.
Henry Scheiker, International Accommodations. I've been a consumer of pest management products for the last 30-odd years, and unfortunately, I have found that the Office of Pest Management and all the predecessors have done a very poor job of protecting me, the consumer. And when you look at it, the reality is they can't really do much to protect the consumer. 30 years ago, I had a building that had termites in it. I had a Mickey Mouse national company come in, do the termites for a year and a half. I finally fired them because they never got rid of the termites. A nice small mom and pop came in, got rid of the termites on the first attempt. Interestingly enough, just a year and a half ago, I was at a building. The building next door had termites. Told the company about it. Guess who was doing the termite control and pest control in general? Was the same Mickey Mouse national corporation. 30 years later, they still couldn't get rid of the termites. 9 months later, the building had termites in exactly the same place it had before. And unfortunately, adding, this task force has added complexity and added more regulation, as opposed to what I believe the original intent was, which was to streamline it. I don't see that, as a consumer, I don't see that any of these additional regulations are going to do anything useful for me, the consumer, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Chair, Task Force, my name is Phyllis M. Paranga, President of It'sOurTurn.com. In 1988, we had 31 pages of regulations. In 1993, we had 54 pages of regulation. And in 2012, we now have 84 pages of over-regulation. 84 pages of regulation that did nothing to bring quality education and quality testing to the industry, did nothing to promote economic recovery. These regulations did nothing to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the consumer. New science and technology did that. You cannot show harm. What these regulations did was provide a business model for 7 major corporations to receive a bigger share of the economic pie. These corporations needed government help to increase their profit margins by creating barriers to entry, inequity, red tape, and to stop competition, small business growth. In return, the executive directorship would receive a higher salary, an increase in his bureaucracy, and a title. And this is how you control an executive director. As I read your position papers, it appears the task force and ASPRO have a keen sense of humor. That's good, because you're going to need it. I have never been a fan of inefficiency, overbloated authority, and bureaucracies. From the beginning, starting in 2000, documents show an agenda to work with ASPRO and the National Pest Control Association to provide misguided information to legislators to undermine the democratic process. This culture has disrupted our industry for 30 years. The judge in the Gloria Killian case a small business owner, female owner, did not really address the bigger issues of antitrust and civil liberties. If legislators accept this task force recommendations as is, the Department of Agriculture will go up for sale to the highest bidder. The farmers and ranchers need to ask themselves one question. Do you have enough resources to fend off this business model from influential national and international corporations? Or will the independent farmers and ranchers contribute to the decline of America as we know it and the American dream of entrepreneurship? Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I want to thank everybody for doing a great job. Thank you very much.
With that, we're going to, I'm going to say my two bits. I do too want to say thank you all. I know you have busy schedules, and some of you had a lengthy drive every time we had one of these meetings, and I really do appreciate that. And the time you guys have spent reviewing these packages and coming and sitting here in these public forums and discussing this stuff. So I personally just want to make sure to tell you how much I appreciate it. The next agenda item is next meeting date, and I guess we don't have one, so we don't have to worry about setting one. It's a good thing. And with that, we will call the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.